Welcome to All Things SOPPA. This is our weekly conversation around all things SOPPA, and we do these at Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Try to keep it right at an hour, if not less. Sometimes we go over a little bit. The slide deck is a running slide deck, so if you've missed the previous, I think, six, the slides from that are at the end of this slideshow that I'll use. So if you keep going through the slide deck, you'll find previous um, slides from previous um, sessions. Also, all these are recorded and they are available through our YouTube channel. They are all public at this point. Initially, I think I had them unlisted, but they should all be public and they should be searchable. And there's playlists set up so that you should be able to find them easily. My name is Chris Worley. I'm the technology coordinator. I haven't been technology coordinator for 3 years. I am the director. That's why it's on my screen. I'm the director of technology services for the Learning Technology Center. As I said, I've been doing this for 3 years, so I should know my title by now. Uh, Feel free to reach out to me with email or schedule a time on my calendar. That's what that link there in red is for, is to actually schedule a 15-minute or a 30-minute spot on my calendar if you need some individual attention. So feel free to do that. So just to get you into Slido so that you can utilize the question and answer functionality. Again, I'll post the Slido link so you can just click on it in the Zoom chat. But it should be a word cloud and should be something that you can just type in there how you feel about SOPPA, whether you're brand new to it or it's something that you've been doing for a little while now. Just kind of, there's one person that's confused. Oh, sorry. Exhausted. So you've been doing it for a while, or you've been thinking about it for a while. Frustrated, annoyed. Um, it's amazing that these are very similar to the other ones that we've had, and overwhelmed seems to be the key word with a lot of these sessions as far as what people are saying. So thank you for sharing. Looking forward to having our conversation today and moving forward with this process. And so as we move on today, look at there that you guys have already got it figured out and already upvoting and doing different things with the questions and answers. So we'll come back to questions and answers and definitely have conversation around these things as we go. So also use the question and answer for if you want to see a particular how-to type of thing, we can do that as well at the end. That might be the easiest way to begin doing how-tos, is to put something in the question and answer and then have people vote those up and down as well. So continue to use the question and answer, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. For those of you that are brand new to SOPPA, what is SOPPA? This is a location where you can find out more information about SOPPA. Watch the video, click on the links on this page to look at the legislative brief on SOPPA. Basically lays out the 9 or 10 things that you need to do from a school district perspective. Also check out the in brief from Robin Swartz as a additional resource. And then as you begin to implement things, you'll want to check out the Illinois Student Privacy Alliance page, and that'll be referenced many times throughout this presentation. So as we begin each week, we want to look at just kind of what's being done in the database and what's being done around the state as far as trying to get data privacy agreements with vendors as part of what's being required of SOPPA. So that's what the initial things are. And then we'll have a couple tips and suggestions, share the resources with everybody, new resources that we have, And we've got some upcoming events. I finally scheduled some things for some more in-depth trainings, and we'll get to your questions and answers. So just looking at the statistics, we didn't have a meeting last week, but I went ahead and captured those statistics so that we didn't have a big gap in there. And so you'll see that there is 453 districts that have requested an account with the Student Privacy Alliance. And the Illinois Student Privacy Alliance is really the LTC. We have paid the membership to the Student Data Privacy Consortium that has a set of database tools and access to the NDPA, which we'll talk about as well. And the database tools is what you request an account for, or that you join the ISPA. That is what you're doing. So 453 different districts, special ed co-ops, vocational schools, private schools have requested accounts inside the database, and hope to be managing their agreements in there. And then the rest of the statistics are for just showing you that there is information and data agreements in the database, and it really just shows that there are things happening. The fact that there's 1,300 agreements in there, those 112, or sorry, 219 of those are originating DPAs, are signified as being originating DPAs. And notice there was a comment in the question and answer that something's wrong with something. So, and that's something that we're aware of, that we're trying to figure out processes. And I know I've said that a few times in these conversations, and we will get that figured out as far as the process to figure out what's working, what's not working, what's good data, what's bad data. So we definitely have room to grow. Again, it's not a requirement for SOPPA that you use the ISPA tools. It's just one way of doing it as we move forward. Here's a list of the, there's 2 pages of originating agreements. So you may see something on here that is something that you use. And the idea of originating agreements is that there should be an Exhibit E inside that originating agreement that was signed by the vendor that says it's okay for this agreement to be used by other school districts with by piggybacking on the originating agreement. So each one of these agreements should have an Exhibit E that can be signed by another district. And then the other agreements are on the second page. And then if you look through the archives by, I pointed at my screen, by clicking on this archived agreements, you can see all the other ones that are there. But you can also get this information from the database. It's just not going to be a snapshot of the last time that you looked at it. So that's kind of what this is just trying to be a snapshot of the most recent things that have originating agreements that weren't there before. Go ahead, Eric. Do you have a question? Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks since I've been on, but you guys were indicated that you were trying to work on like Google and Apple. Is there any progress made with the big dogs? Because those are the ones who I'm most worried about.
Yeah, that's a good question. Google, the national, the Student Data Privacy Consortium is working with Google. They have all of they have the NDPA, they have the Exhibit G for Illinois, and then they have the Exhibit Gs for the other states that are part of the Student Data Privacy Consortium. And they are having conversations with Google to work through a way to make this work. Also, in a conversation with Annie Nash, she's also aware of that communication is going on. So it's not just the Student Data Privacy Consortium telling me that they're in communications with Google. also Google saying that they're in communication with the Student Data Privacy Consortium. So I feel like that's in the right hands and is moving forward. I also was on a conversation with the Student Data Privacy Consortium today as part of the registry enhancements, and the conversation went something like, Illinois has got Apple's ear, and that they are mentioning Illinois in the conversation with the National Data Privacy Agreement. So I feel like things are happening. I don't know who's doing the Apple communication at this point, but I feel like somebody's doing it because I'm hearing it from other locations. So
I appreciate the update.
yeah, and also ILTPP has a relationship with Microsoft, and the conversation's been had with Microsoft as well, and they're aware of SOPPA and are willing to have conversations around it and are aware of it. So
Surprised they weren't the first ones, because they actually had their lobbyists sitting at the table with us in Springfield when we were talking about it. So
okay.
if they're saying we just heard about this, they got other problems. So
No, that's not what they're saying at all. They're just trying to figure out how to get everybody a signed agreement and all those types of things. I think that's really what's going to come down to is how do they handle all the different signed agreements with making a signed agreement or without making signed agreements, and how do we make that part of our process and all those types of things. So good question. I spoke just a minute ago about the features enhancements of the database. I did see a lot of Illinois representation on the list. So if there's things that are happening in the database that you're seeing that could be better, whether it's functionality, whether it's the way the screen's laid out, whatever it may be, as you're seeing those types of things, because you guys are the ones that are using it, please fill out that Google form and make sure that when we go to the table to figure out what's going to be the next thing that gets updated and fixed, we can make those recommendations, and that'll be on the list of things to do. Whether it's a big thing or a small thing, just, I mean, it's really important that we do that. Otherwise, if it's not in it's just like all of you that have tech requests coming from your teachers. If they're not in the queue, they're not going to get answered. So I'm just going to leave this here, but this is for those of you that have been on the conversations. Definitely have this slide always here, just so that you can reference it if you ever need to reference it. And basically, if you have access to the press policies through IASB, then there's really nothing here for you other than that those are available. If you don't use press as part of IASB, those policies are available to you, and you would use this link to email somebody at IASB to get those policies. SOPPA for Teachers, again, this is just a placeholder. This is a webinar that we had in March, the beginning of March, and that's hard to believe that's been 6 weeks ago already. But the slide deck's here, the on-demand video is there, and feel free to use the slide deck and pull out pieces of it, reuse that stuff. And if you have additional resources that you've used with your teachers or district administration or anybody like that, feel free to pass that on to me, and I can get that shared out with people. As part of our resources, this is the resources page. This is kind of the page that you start on as you get started with anything. The very first thing you would do is join ISPA. So if you don't have an account with the database, this is how you get it, by going to this link. I'm going to click on this and go out to the actual website. So if you click on this link, you would request a district account from all of these districts, and those are all the districts that don't have accounts at this point inside the database. So if you know of anybody that hasn't done that, you can show them that's how they do that. This is where you would log into the database, and then just other resources that are here and available to you. Down the middle is where kind of the meat and potatoes are. The Illinois NDPA agreement is here. That is the PDF document that can be used. I've had a couple requests for a fillable Word document. I'm working on that. And so that is the full agreement that can be used to share out sample communications. So that's a document that has just a cut and paste template type of thing that can be utilized when sending the agreement to places or having conversations with places. This is a new document, and there's a slide in here that shares this document, but this is something that the regional people for the LTC are sharing out to superintendents and districts and ROEs during the administrative meetings. So they're getting the ear of superintendents in different places around the state. So this is just the document that they're sharing, very similar to the other workflow documents, but just kind of front and back, very text-based, and would also be a good document for you to use when sharing this with people within your district. Again, these are the flow charts that I talked about. And then the YouTube playlists are here. This is the one that all things SOPPA recordings will be made available. This is a how-to slide deck or how-to playlist of all the things that you would do in the database. So these are, thank you to Sean Mullins for making these and continuing to help with the process. So those are all available there. And then also reasonable security practices. Again, this is a document that'll take you through and show you some ideas for reasonable security. All things SOPA, the calendar over here, and I'll just bring up the couple things that I'm going to bring up later. On April 22nd, which will be next Thursday, we're going to have a panel discussion led by Lisa Schwartz. She's the RETC in the West Central part of the state, and she's gathered a few people to talk about the different tools that are available, whether it be Catch On or Learn Platform, SDPC, education framework, or homegrown type solutions as well. So that'll be a panel discussion of tech people talking about the tools that they're using to handle these processes. This particular one is a roundtable at ROE3, and the other stuff that I have in upcoming events won't be on the website yet, but will get on there soon. So additional resources that are available. This is the document that I just spoke of. That's the upcoming event that I just spoke of. So that is clickable. You should be able to link into that and get registered for that if you want to. And then I've talked a couple of different weeks about going back to things I did in October, November, and redoing those recordings and live presentations. And these are, so on Monday afternoons, April 26th, so not next week, but the following week on Monday afternoon, I'll do how to use the database tools. So a lot of the stuff that's in the tutorials that Sean put together in the YouTube playlist, we'll basically go through that in an hour, trying to cover all the different menu options and how to use the database, how to upload agreements, how to do all the things that are in those YouTube playlists. So it's a good opportunity that if you've had a chance over the next week and a half to mess around in the database, you'll be able to ask questions and get a clearer idea. And then we'll repeat that on May 10th, because I just have a feeling that we're going to continue to see people joining the conversation and needing that onboarding for doing this. And then in between that, we'll have a discussion or have a kind of a go through of the full Illinois NDPA document. Again, there is a webinar recorded on demand from November that I did go through the NDPA, but that's something we'll do during that session on May 3rd as well. And having a room full of tech people, I need to make sure you are aware of all the different things we're doing at the LTC. Having the Be Connected webinars, they're not really webinars as much as they are discussions. We've been averaging 5 or 6 people every Thursday just talking about different things. Last week, we talked about virtualization, so just different things with regards to desktop virtualization or server virtualization, backups for virtualization, those types of things, and people sharing their experiences. This week we're talking about social media, and I saw a question in our Q&A kind of similar to, I think, the discussion that we'll have around social media on Thursday. IT certifications, always a big topic. I don't know how many people in the room are actually experimenting with the CISSP certification. That is a free mentoring program through FR Secure, but that's just an idea of the conversation that we can have around certifications. And then Wireshark is something that people are always talking about on the different forums, and just a way that we can have a conversation around how people are using it, what they use it for, when they use it, when they don't use it, when they would use another tool or something like that. And then we just finished up some Google trainings. I think we had 5 sessions on Fridays, and not this coming Friday, but next Friday. I pretended to look at my calendar. We are going to have a conversation around using Microsoft and Google in the same environment, and that is a discussion. These discussions are going to be led by Microsoft people. The Intune conversation, many of you may know Jody Lefevre, used to be Gaver, but now it's Jody Lefevre. She's the technology specialist or tech specialist for the Midwest for Microsoft, and she'll be talking about Intune. And then we probably should have started out with licensing, but the person that's doing the presentation for licensing is not available until the 21st. But because all things Microsoft always come back to licensing conversations, and then they get stuck, and then we never go any further. So having those Microsoft licensing conversations is important, and something that we'll do coming up. And breath. All right, so continue to put your questions and answers in here, and we'll see what we can get answered for you. If anyone has insight on anything that I say, or wants to get further clarification, feel free to either reach out to me after this or unmute your microphone during the conversation here. We'll just kind of go down through these, answer them, and then if there's any how-to stuff, we can answer those. And that's what we'll do today. So I put the slide deck in again, and the Slido should get you to the Q&A document. Sorry. All right, so the first question here. We use Skyward for our SIS, but is hosted by IS Corp. Do we need an agreement with Skyward, IS Corp, or both? I don't officially know that answer. I would say it's going to be a conversation that will be had by some district or some users group, because there is a Skyward users group, I believe. that maybe we could have that conversation with somebody at Skyward to figure out how they feel about data privacy agreements. Ultimately, it comes down to, does anybody have access to that data at IS Corp, at Skyward? Um, my guess is ultimately yes, they have access to that data, and you need to have an agreement with them. Or as somebody just put in the chat, which makes sense too, is that if you're paying Skyward to do that, then IS Corp may be a subcontractor that would be listed in the data privacy agreement with Skyward. So either way, you're going to have knowledge of that and have um, some kind of written knowledge of what is going on with that data and where it's at. So I would say you're either going to have it with Skyward and have IS Corp as a subcontractor, or you're going to have it with IS Corp and Skyward's going to be the subcontractor, or you're going to have a data privacy agreement with both of them. That would be not maybe the answer you're looking for, but it's not going to be easy in that situation. And it kind of comes back to that question too about another instance of something like that would be Backupify or something like that, where it's really just backing up your data and they're storing it somewhere for you, but it's not like they are taking that information and doing anything with it. But at the same time, you need to have some type of agreement with that company to say, this is what we're doing with that data. This is what we'll do with it if you're no longer a customer, because so that would be something to think about. And again, if I don't answer your question the way you worded it or feel like you need more clarification, I'm totally open to those conversations on the conversation on the conference call or afterwards. If we have a student enrolled out of district, is their serving school responsible for vendors they use, or do homeschools need to add those to our list? I would, obviously not being a lawyer and really just kind of being that technical liaison for the database, I would ultimately say that you don't, as the um, hosting school, have to have agreements for what your serving schools are doing. So I would say that the serving school is going to be responsible for their vendors, not you. Um, I would have, I guess if I was a school district that was dealing with that though, I would also just kind of not just assume that they're doing that. And I would have um, just a way to know that they are or aren't doing that. So if a conversation comes up with one of your parents, that you would have the information that you need, and that you don't plead ignorance or those types of things. So because I don't think that's probably the best thing to do um, as a school district dealing with student information. So ultimately, it is going to be the serving school's responsibility, though, according to Chris. Sometimes the Exhibit E is not checked, but the Exhibit E top portion is completed. Is this acceptable? Yes and no. I think if you are seeing things like that, please just pass those along to me. I think I have a couple examples of things that people have passed along to me, and I may just not have them fixed. But again, if if you assume that somebody else is going to report the issue, then maybe nobody's going to report the issue. So if you see something like that, definitely let me know what the agreement is and who it's with, and I can double check and see what we can get clarified, because ultimately it should be checked, and it would just be better if it was. Whether or not that voids any agreements or anything like that, I don't know, but if we can fix it, we'll fix it in some way. So definitely reach out with those specific agreements that are having the issue. Does Facebook, Twitter, Instagram need to be included when student pictures or work are in posts? Again, I think this is going to be one of those questions that's going to be meant for some attorney to answer this question, and then ultimately, hopefully that'll pass along to other school districts. And ultimately, I don't think you're going to get a data privacy agreement with Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And if you try to, I mean, you could make your case as the Holiday Inn Express lawyer or the I Watch TV lawyer and say that because they're not actually education, that we probably don't have to have agreements with them. But that kind of goes into what I was talking about with the social media conversations. And it goes into other things, data privacy besides SOPPA, and do we have to have data privacy agreements with them? It's just are posting pictures and work and those types of things, are those against data privacy, other regulations and laws and those types of things? So do we need to just be aware of that and know that what we're doing may or may not cross the line and those types of things? So I guess that goes back to before SOPA was even a law, or before the SOPA amendments were added to the SOPA law, that we should have been concerned about that anyway. So just, I don't think SOPA is going to apply to this, but I do believe we need to be aware of that and just be having those conversations as districts and concerned about what we're posting and who we're posting it of. Do we need agreements with colleges and universities where counselors go in and provide where'd it go? Oh, it moved on me. And provide evaluations on students, giving the university student information. Again, that's probably one of those things that was covered by other student privacy laws, as far as what information you give to in situations like that. I think it's going to be important that you know what data you're giving them, and if somebody ever asks you what that information is, but I don't think you're going to have data agreements with those types of institutions. The questions come up about elementary schools and or like elementary school districts that are going to feeders, high school districts, vice versa. And just it's just something that you need to be aware of, and something that needs to be considered when you're doing that. Just be aware of what data you're giving people, why you're giving them that data, and tracking that and knowing who's using it and who's not using it. If there are occupation or outside therapists that work with students, do their apps need to be included? Occupational therapist that comes to work with students at school. Ultimately, it depends on if that application is being has student data in it, if they're storing student data, if it's an outside occupational therapist and they work for an organization that could keep track of that student information, then they probably should. If And again, I know the things I'm saying, like how to track this stuff and how to figure all this stuff out. I'm not saying I know how to do all this stuff, but I'm just kind of speaking here from what I feel like the right answer would be, or a answer. It may not be the right answer, but I just feel like if that occupational therapist is getting student information and storing that student information somewhere, whether it's being used in an app or anything, like you need to be aware of that as a school district. Because if the parents ask how this information got in the hands of this person, or if if the worst happens and somebody gets that information some way, then how did that information get out? I mean, for all they know, it came from you, but um, but if it came through another organization, you would want to know that so that you could keep that from happening again. When you say Apple is talking compliance, what does that mean for native apps, for tools that use Apple IDs? What exactly will the Apple Agreement DPA cover? Again, I don't have specifics on that information. It would be just an Apple agreement. It would not, I mean, just if we go into Google and have a Google agreement, it's not going to cover all the apps and extensions and all those types of things. And we even had discussion the other day talking about the NDPA and what the Google agreement would even cover. Is it going to cover things like YouTube and what was the other one that's not, that would probably, like Blogger, that aren't part of the core apps and aren't part of this, would it still cover things like that? So there's going to be lots of questions about this, and ultimately that's going to go to a higher person than us as school district people. It's going to be lawyers, it's going to be legislators, it's going to be all those types of things as they try to figure out, like, where's the line, where's the end point of how far we need to go with all this. But I think the main Apple agreement would cover their apps, but not tools that use Apple IDs or apps on iPads and all those types of things. Are sites that collect PII information about students, such as a site that teaches typing and that can anyone use without having to log in, exempt? Yeah, I mean, you're going to be able to parse all those different things, and if you want to try to figure out if it is exempt or not exempt, like ultimately, I feel like the way to find out if it's exempt or not is to send them a data privacy agreement and request that they sign it. And if they don't want to sign it, then like, what does that mean to you as a district? What does that mean to us as school districts in Illinois in general? I know it's a lot to ask, but why? And ultimately you answered, I mean, I've got my screen kind of covering up a question that as I look at this question, it says that don't, sites that don't collect PII information. Yeah, if site does not collect PII information, then it's not an issue. So there's really no conversation there. Kevin, did you have a question or? Nope. All right, thanks. Just want to make sure that if people unmute, that they're welcome to answer or ask questions. The Canvas agreement does not have first and last name checked. Is that acceptable? Probably not if you're referring to Exhibit B. If that information is being passed back and forth, then it's probably something that we need to look at and explore a little bit more.
Yeah, so that was my question.
Okay, thanks, Stacy.
So when you say we need to explore that more, like we were just hesitant to sign it because of something as little as that, what happens now?
Right. So I guess one thing I would need to do from my standpoint is to know what that agreement is, where it's at, who it was with originally, and then to follow up with some kind of conversation with them just to find out if that was an oversight or what their feeling on the agreement was, and then try to backtrack all that information and see what we can figure out with that. So and that would be one of those workflows that we need to get figured out from an alliance standpoint of managing or helping to manage all these things.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, related to that Canvas one, that also for anybody else who's looking at it, it's a vendor specific one that has to get passed by your legal team first. But then also, if you do piggyback onto it, right now, the original agreement doesn't appear on the customized resource listing page for your site. It only shows your Exhibit E, which I know is something that's getting worked on as well.
Okay. So there's definitely issues with the Canvas agreement that we need to follow up with and see. And I do have, I'm checking these questions and they're disappearing from the screen, but I have access to them to follow up with trying to make these part of the dialogue and different, making sure that we do answer these questions if we don't get them answered today. The originating contract for Clever has extensive information in Section H. Doesn't that sort of negate the universal contract approach? That is a great question and a great example of what the Illinois NDPA, what we're trying to do. Obviously, we're not going to get to that pie in the sky. This is the agreement that we're going to have, and everybody's going to sign it, and it's all going to be just within exhibits A through G. The idea of the Illinois NDPA is that the NDPA agreement was generated by, and this is more information than we probably need to answer this question, but this will be covered in the May 3rd full length discussion. But the idea is that any changes that need to be made to the agreement would be in Exhibit H. One of the first steps is to take the Illinois NDPA to your attorney and say, hey, look at this agreement and say, is this okay that we enter into agreements with this as the basis for the agreement with the vendor? And so if other schools are doing it with that A through G, then you have that agreement, and the lawyer has already said that you can do that. There's certain check marks that you should look for inside the agreement to make sure it does, just like what somebody brought up about Canvas with the first and last name in Exhibit B, just making sure it fits your needs. But if there's Exhibit H, ultimately you as a district employee, unless you're the district lawyer, you're not going to parse that information and say, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay. You're going to want to send that to your legal team and make sure that they vet what's in Exhibit H. And so ideally, what this does negate, it doesn't sort of negate the universal contract approach. It does negate the universal contract approach in the sense that all those things in Exhibit H need to be vetted in some way, shape, or form. If for some reason your lawyer comes back to you and says, okay, all these things are acceptable, then maybe the next time you look at an Exhibit H, you can say all those things are acceptable. But again, that's just time and money and effort that goes into this whole process. And this is something that we're going to have growing pains with all this. Like it's going to work, it's not going to work, it's going to be a lot of work. The Exhibit H is going to be used a lot at the beginning. Maybe we can work it out to where in the future it doesn't get used as much. We'd like it not to be used at all, so that that process is effective, efficient, and people can piggyback and jump on to those agreements without doing a lot to it. Otherwise, you have to look through every agreement and look through the Exhibit H and make sure that there's nothing there that would not be beneficial to your district or whatever, or not be support. Ultimately, it's what's going to be supported by your lawyer, is really what it comes down to. Do we know what happens if you forget an app or site, or we enter information incorrectly? You will be sent directly to school jail. And rough crowd, nobody laughed. No, that is not been determined. Oh, I got one round of applause. It is something that was brought up in the Robin Schwartz SOPPA amendments webinar that is on the data privacy page that you can go back and look at. But basically, it's up to the Attorney General, I believe, or Assistant Attorney General, or some specific person that would look at it from the eyes of another particular law that's on the books that I'm blanking on right now. Had something to do with fraud or something like that. So consumer fraud or something along those lines. So I think best effort is always going to be something that you can rely on. Again, there's going to be lots of apps that are going to be that we're going to be in the process of trying to work through, trying to negotiate, trying to do all these things, and again, we're going to make mistakes. And I, from my standpoint as being a former tech coordinator, that's okay. We can't. I mean, obviously, I can't speak to anything else other than you can only do what you can do. So. You spoke to web resources having Google SSO as their only PI in the last meeting, being okay without an agreement. What if the email has a student ID last name in it? Again, that's going to be something that it's going to be a case by case situation. I don't know the specific answer to that. But the fact that that question's being asked, there are situations where we need to think about that. Like if we're using first name, last name, or we're using last name, maybe that's something we need to think about changing if that's the case. But I guess just be aware of it and know that at some point that may become PII in the sense of that's enough to trigger an agreement. But also if you're getting into some of these areas and they are requiring an email and they're collecting information, or they're using that to track different things, then ultimately you may end up having to have an agreement anyway. But just for login purposes, I guess I wonder why would they need login purposes if there wasn't some kind of tracking in the first place. But that's definitely something that we have to worry about and consider and think about. Can we see what's in an agreement for new requests? We need to add grade level to the IXL agreement, but can't wait for a new request to be approved to piggyback from. Gina, do you have
I am here.
more information?
So what we're looking for is in the IXL agreement, it does not include the grade level checked in B, but if someone else is already asking for the IXL agreement with the B, we can wait to piggyback from that one rather than swamping IXL with more new requests.
Right.
Can we see what's in a new request that's out there already?
Not necessarily. If a new request is out there for IXL, they just may not have converted that from, like, that just may be that they put that in the database as being something that they need to get an agreement with, not necessarily that they are asking IXL for an agreement. And they haven't converted that request into an actual agreement at this point. So there isn't a agreement associated with a new request. As soon as a request becomes an agreement, then it's no longer a request. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. Well, we can submit our own.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
and I guess that would be, that's some of the upgrades that have been discussed with the SDPC have been that idea of having a different exhibit B for the data that you want to have with the agreement. And so that would be a good example of a reason why having that functionality would be nice, in the sense that you can piggyback on the agreement, but you want this exhibit B to be the data that's associated with that full agreement. And so that feature is not available at this point, but that's something that I think in the future will be available and is being requested by other alliances around the United States. And ultimately, I think we would need to get approval by the vendors as well to understand that the exhibit B might be different for each school district type of thing. So
Okay.
good
Thank you,
question.
Chris.
And yep. And hopefully we can make that process better. So I'll remind them the database, but not, what about GroupMe, Slack, and Signal? These are all different modes of communication that are used by coaches to communicate. And when you say to communicate, does that mean to students? Do they have student information in those, applications? That would be
Chris,
yeah. Go ahead, Amber.
So with Remind, it can't, the kids can sign up either via their phone, their personal email, but a lot of them are signing up with their school information. And GroupMe, you can do it the app, you can do it on your computer. Some kids don't have the smartphone, or they don't have a phone at all. So I'm thinking all the way down from, like, starting in 6th grade, that these types of apps are being used all the way through high school. And
Yep.
I didn't even know about Signal till a teacher brought it to my attention. I have no idea.
Isn't Signal the private communication, like encrypted communication one? Maybe I'm thinking wrong, but
I
I
have
was
no
thinking,
idea. I never even heard about it.
yeah.
Yes, it is, Chris.
Okay. So I guess ultimately my question would be, like, Slack and Signal specifically, like, why are those being used in the school district? I mean, I know why the functionality may be there, but ultimately, that maybe go a long ways beyond the data privacy discussion. Like, Slack is so much more than just maybe the narrow view that they're using. We kind of saw that with Flipgrid. Like, we have this narrow view of what Flipgrid is, but all this other stuff's going on around the outside of it. The same thing with Slack and Signal. I think, like, I would really question those two. I don't really know what GroupMe is or how that would be worked. But again, all of these different applications, and that goes back to that whole discussion of app vetting and curriculum and professional development and training and all those things that we talk about in school districts. that maybe these apps just aren't the right apps that we need to be using anyway. And this is our excuse for not doing it because we don't have a data privacy agreement, or we're not even going to attempt to get a data privacy agreement with these apps. And I know that that's kind of a simplistic view and easy for me to say, but those are the types of conversations I think we are going to have. And it's going to be because of SOPPA, but it's not necessarily, it's probably a conversation that should have been happening before SOPPA. So I know that doesn't necessarily answer that question, but I don't actually see a question in that, or question mark in that statement. So I'm just kidding. That probably didn't answer or make you feel any better, but that's what
Well,
is
it'll
it?
allow me to go to the lawyer and have
Yeah.
him decide what can be used and what cannot be used.
Yep. Yeah, and you guys definitely have an advantage having the in-house lawyer to, I mean, that's like printing money when you have all these things to work about.
I wouldn't say that.
It's like job security for him.
Yeah.
What is the recommendation for Exhibit E? Are they supposed to be posted separately to the database? If so, I need to have a conversation with our tech department. Ultimately, yes. The Exhibit E, so when you're posting the agreement, and this would be something that I would go through on the database, and it's also in the YouTube videos. When you're posting an agreement as the originating agreement, you go through and you post the full agreement, and then you pull out the Exhibit E, and then on the next screen, it's going to be upload the Exhibit E, so that, and it's going to be the top part is going to be what's signed by the vendor and dated based on your agreement, and then the bottom part's going to be blank. And so then when people either use the Exhibit E creator, or they just download the Exhibit E document and sign it and then re-upload it, or they use the Exhibit E creator and it signs it for them, then that's the document that it uses, is that one-page document that's the Exhibit E, and they should be separate in the database. So if you do have conversation, or if you have, reach out to me and we'll figure out where that's at and what's going on, and we can help.
That would be me again, Chris.
All right, we can figure that out.
Okay.
And it may be maybe, I know at one point there was an agreement or a PDF that didn't allow you to extract pages or print pages or do something. So maybe there's an older PDF document out there, or maybe I have the wrong one uploaded at this point. So of the IL-NDPA document. Originating agreement for school messenger is incorrect. Okay, I'll take a look at that. And we'll just kind of,
Chris, you mind if I mention something real fast while you're looking through
yeah,
those?
go ahead. Yep.
It related to the Exhibit E uploading piece. Over the past week or so, I've been going through and doing some more of those auto e-generator style agreements. And there have been a couple of agreements that are out there where there is something that has been uploaded into the Exhibit E area, but the district had re-uploaded the full originating agreement. And then when another district goes to use the auto e-generator, it doesn't error out. It goes ahead and it works, but it grabs the first page off of the originating agreement and dumps your information onto it.
Okay.
So for anybody who may have been using that tool in the past week or so, just maybe double check your Exhibit E's on your customized resource listing page. And if you pull it up and it looks like the front page of the originating agreement and it just has your Exhibit E info on the bottom, then make sure to flag that and go back and either what I did was pull out the E from the originating agreement and print it and sign it and re-upload it. But also, like, that district has been contacted. There's one of them at least that I contacted, and they were going to go through try to upload the correct E, and then I'm sure it could be piggybacked off of again, and it would go through correctly. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I think with that Exhibit E generator, it's easy to do it and then never double check to see if the resulting document was good, or and not even assume that it may have had some sort of error attached to it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to if somebody sees that and notices that, let us know, so we can nip that in the bud a little bit. And then the other thing, I guess, kind of going back to that question about, like, what if we miss an app, or what if we do something wrong in the database, or don't check something. Like, there's going to be mistakes with this. We're really, I mean, looking back at that chart that shows the upward trend of all the agreements, we can tell that there's a lot of stuff happening, but we may not know all that stuff is absolutely correct and working exactly as it should. But we're moving in the right direction. I mean, if we're getting that originating agreement, that's the most important thing. And you having your list of applications is a very important thing. And then as we can match those two up and be able to piggyback on those agreements, ultimately we can go back in and do the subscribe as an Exhibit E if we needed to. If we have those originating agreements, like, ultimately it's just going to be busy work at that point. So I feel like the more stuff that we're doing, even if it's not exactly right, it's still better than not doing anything at all and just waiting for everything to be perfect and everything to be exactly right and those types of things. So be frustrated enough to send me emails, but don't be frustrated enough that you just throw up your hands and say, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. And hopefully that's what these conversations every week, coming back and not just talking to yourself in your office, like I used to do as the tech coordinator. And hopefully you're having these conversations with more than just the technology person, not more than just the instructional technology person, more than just your curriculum person, more than principals and superintendents and everybody that should be involved in this conversation. So I'm just going to look at a couple more of these. If there are specific things that you want, we can, obviously we're at 3:04 now, and I don't want to, I know there's that whole fear of missing out on the big announcement of something, but I've covered all the main things, the resources. I am recording this, so if there are things that pull you away, I know you're going to disappear on me anyway, so don't feel bad about it. And main thing that we get from these conversations is you're not alone. Feel like you can reach out to me, share questions with me. If I'm not getting back to you as quickly as possible, send me another email. That's okay. I know that's how tech requests work. When I was at the school district, people get tired of waiting on me to do fix something, and they would send another tech request, and that's okay. Don't feel like you're not going to get your question answered, or it's not important, because it is. I see this question about would SOPPA apply to student employees in our HR system, which is different than our SIS? Would it or wouldn't it? That's a good question. Yeah, ultimately your lawyer is going to make that call, but I would hesitate to say no. I think I would lean towards yes, that you will need a SOPPA agreement for something like that, where you've got student information. I don't know. I mean, if a lawyer wants to parse the words and say that that wasn't designed for educational use, then that's one thing. But I don't know. That's a good question. And then I also see the question about, and I knew this question was going to come up, and maybe it's come up already. I uploaded a 1.0 agreement recently, and 1.0A was the only option. And that is something that that I'm aware of, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. Whether it's going to be once we get through and get to where we are uploading the originating agreement as 1A, we're still going to have piggybacking agreements as ones. There's just some stuff I have to work out with talking to the SDPC and see what we can figure out as far as how best to list that and how to piggyback on those agreements and know that they're 1.0 agreements versus 1A agreements and stuff like that. So thanks for bringing that up, and I will make that more of a priority to look at, because that is it's an issue. So
It is, especially when you are like when you specifically search for, because when you can search for the different types of agreements. And so if they're saying that 1.0A is the only option when they're uploading an old agreement, that means any old agreement is going to look like it's the new agreement. And then when you go into it, you realize that it's the old one.
right.
And so as a district that will only use the new agreement, that's an issue, especially when you're trying to do a filter search.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely see the reason, and I will see what we can do about that. All right. There are more questions here. If there's a specific question that you want me to answer, please unmute and ask your question. Otherwise, we will come back together next week and do this again. Next week is the panel presented by Lisa, and then on the 26th, I will do the first session of the how to use the database and where things are at. But also check out the YouTube playlist that's available on our resources page. So if you still have questions, you can stick around. If you don't, I understand.